Throughout Jujutsu Kaisen, we have seen different characters grow at different rates. We have seen characters that have grown steadily over time like Yuji and Megami, and we have also seen sorcerers who had one big massive leap in power like Maki. But there's no character in Jujutsu Kaisen, no sorcerer or curse, who had a higher ceiling than Mahito. Mahito also had one of the most insane growth rates that we have seen in Jujutsu Kaisen, and I truly do believe that with enough time, Mahito would have become the next Sukuna. Do you remember what Nanami said back in chapter 24 after his first encounter and fight with Mahito? You see, after just fighting Mahito, Nanami knew before everyone else that Mahito, if he was given enough time to live, would become a society-ending threat for Japan. Here Nanami says it doesn't seem like much time has passed since he appeared. He's greedily enjoying his growth. The spirit Gojo fought could even use domain expansion. If the child spirit survived, it's only a matter of time before it reaches that point. We can expect an unfathomable body count. If we're not quick in exercising him, we might be past the point of no return. Here Nanami is recognizing that if the Jujutsu Society does not exercise Mahito quickly, they will be completely screwed, and they would have no way of stopping Mahito because of how much power he would gain. But why is Nanami saying this? Why is it so important that the Jujutsu Society exercise Mahito quickly? Is it true that Mahito would get past the point where the Jujutsu Society would not be able to exercise him? Well, first, to answer this question, we have to look at what Mahito's ability is and how exactly it can even be fought against. We know that Mahito's curse technique is idle transfiguration. It allows him to reshape the soul. But what exactly does this mean? We see that Mahito tells Nanami that the shape of the body will always be dependent on the shape of the soul. And Mahito says that he's not actually healing when he's fighting Nanami, he's just reinforcing the shape of his soul, thereby reinforcing the shape of his body. So what this means is that conventional attacks do not work on Mahito unless you hit his soul. And he says this numerous amount of times throughout the series, that it doesn't matter how many times you hit him. He even says that he can be crushed to bits. As long as you're not hitting his soul, it doesn't matter. He's just going to get right back up and effectively receive no damage. Mahito's curse technique essentially allows him to have some of the best defense you could ask for. You can defend without even actually having to defend, because your body does it for you. But not only defense, his curse technique also allows him to have some of the most broken offense we have seen in Jujutsu Kaisen. When it says that Mahito can reshape and transfigure a soul, it wasn't just talking about his own. We know that Mahito, if he touches somebody else, can reshape their soul. In the fanbook it says, since sorcerers are not used to protecting their own souls with curse energy, the outcome of the fight has already been decided as soon as the technique user touches any ordinary sorcerer. Now right here they're talking about Mahito. Sorcerers have not really had a reason to be in tune with their own souls, so they don't even know how to protect their own souls with curse energy, so they just automatically lose to Mahito. It also says in this same section of the fanbook that since his technique boasts a deadly power, Mahito's fighting style is mainly based on finding an opening in the opponent's defense in order to touch them. He does this by using transfigured humans who are modified with idle transfiguration. The reason Mahito's power is stated as deadly is because he only needs to touch you in order to beat you. But we do know that there has been a time when he touched an opponent and they did not die. And that was when he was weaker towards the beginning of the series when he was fighting against Nanami. Not only was Mahito weaker then, but Nanami also was subconsciously protecting his soul with curse energy, so Mahito wasn't able to kill him in just one touch. And we also do have a statement later in the Shibuya incident when Mahito is fighting Todo that he wasn't exactly sure if he would be able to defeat Todo in just one touch, because Todo's soul was at 100% and Mahito's soul was only at 40%. So Mahito wasn't exactly sure if just one touch would be able to take out Todo, but even if one touch wasn't enough, 2 or 3 would definitely get the job done. This means that if you are in a fight with Mahito, he only has to touch you about 1 to 3 times before he's won. And it's not even like you're just worrying about Mahito himself. He has all of these transfigured humans that he can just stock up at any moment by just going on a killing rampage. So he will blind you, get these transfigured humans to get in your way, and he'll come out of nowhere and touch you. and even if you don't die to the first touch, it would undoubtedly weaken you, like we saw back in his first fight with Nanami, where Nanami's side was hurt. But that is enough of talking about Mahito's unbelievable curse technique. Let's talk about Mahito's insane growth rate, which leads me to believe that he would have been the next Sukuna. We know that the reason Mahito was propped up as the leader of the disaster curses was because he would continue to grow stronger. When Mahito was getting beat up by Nanami and Yuji back in chapter 29, we see that on the brink of what he says is death, he figures out how to do a domain expansion. The most important part about Mahito being able to just do a domain expansion is that the level of power he was at was not that powerful. In terms of hitting power, curse energy amount, and raw speed, Mahito was just around the level of Nanami and Yuji from back in chapter 20s. And even though he was only just about as strong and fast as those guys, he far surpassed them in technique usage as he was able to use a domain expansion. Yuji still doesn't have a domain expansion to this day, and Nanami also says that he was never able to learn a domain expansion. But at around their same level in power, he was able to use a domain. We also see in Shibuya that because he landed a Black Flash, he had an awakening. Remember when Gojo was fighting against the disaster curses in the train station? Here he opens up a domain expansion for 0.2 seconds. You see, when Gojo opens up a domain, he doesn't have to activate the domain, then activate the sure hit. While you were being enveloped by Gojo's domain, you were also being hit by the sure hit. And even though Mahito saw Gojo do this just once, and even though Mahito himself was stunned by this domain expansion, he was able to learn and use it for himself. In chapter 130, when Mahito is fighting against Yuji and Todo, he finds himself in a position where he thinks it would be best to open up a domain expansion and get Todo out of the way. Now, the reason he can't keep this domain open and also fight Yuji is because Sukuna resides in Yuji's body. And you saw what happened last time Mahito tried to have a domain over Yuji's body. Sukuna just came out and sliced Mahito. So instead, Mahito opts to do Gojo's 0.2 second domain expansion and get Todo out of the fight. So when Mahito decides to pop his domain, here it says the realization of an innate domain, plus the activation of a curse technique. The two-step process was shortened to one. Thanks to his awakening due to Black Flash, Mahito managed to pull off this sublimely fast maneuver. So all it is saying here is that Mahito is able to open up his domain and activate his sure hit in one smooth process. And we see here that Mahito is successful in transfiguring Todo's hand away and successfully putting him out of the fight. Now, Todo losing his hand here is very important for my next point, in that Todo is never going to get his hand back. And this isn't something that is just Todo specific. It is actually said by Jogo that Mahito's idle transfiguration cannot be fixed. So after he transfigures something, you can't just heal it. We know that attacks to the soul cannot be healed, not only because of this Jogo statement, but also because attacks that Sukuna has landed on Inumaki and the Angel still have not been healed. It would make perfect sense that Sukuna would be able to perceive the soul, not only because, well, he is just Sukuna, but we know that he was also using Yuji's body as a host, as a vessel, while he was waiting on himself to return. And remember when Mahito said that the reason that Yuji was able to hurt him was because Yuji had another soul residing inside of him. So it would make sense that Sukuna is able to perceive the soul and attack it, and this would also explain why, even though their best efforts at putting the Angel in the hospital, they can't fix her arm. The same with Inumaki, that even though Yuta can heal others with reverse curse technique, Inumaki's arm is still gone, and so is the Angel's. Which is why even though we saw Yuta healing people in Volume 0, he can't heal Inumaki and the Angel. This means that if you are fighting Mahito, he doesn't even need to go for the one-shot kill by completely transfiguring you beyond the point of no return. He can aim for your arms, transfigure your hand maybe, and you will no longer be able to use that hand ever, even if you can use reverse curse technique. We also saw in the fight with Yuji that Mahito was actually able to unlock his true form. We saw that because he was hit with a Black Flash from Yuji, and he was able to use his domain expansion and everything that had happened up until this point in the series. Mahito said that he had finally found it. He had finally found his true form. In a chapter extra, Gege tells us exactly what this new form is, so we'll quickly go over it. Here at the top it gives a short summary. It says that this is Mahito's unbridled soul. He is 200% tougher than his original form, and this binding vow further increases his toughness in exchange for halting his metamorphosis. And we also see that his hands stay like in their original form, which means that even though his entire appearance has changed, because his hands are the same, he can still use idle transfiguration. And protruding from Mahito's elbows, he now has blades. Here it says that due to a binding vow shortening the metamorphosis cycle, he hardly sacrifices any toughness even when catching opponents at a moderate distance. It's sort of like Senku Kogetsu from World Trigger, so Gege decided not to include an explanation in the manga. And what is arguably the most important part of this page when it comes to the question of, well, with all of these new abilities, how did Mahito lose? Here it says that if Yuji had not nailed Mahito with that Black Flash, Mahito would have torn Yuji to shreds. We even saw earlier in that fight with True Form Mahito, Yuji says that his attacks don't even reach him, and that as a cursed spirit, Mahito has become something completely different. So, with a bit of main characterness going on, Yuji was able to land a Black Flash and defeat Mahito. Remember how Sukuna gave Jogo that talk at the end of Jogo's life, and he basically told Jogo that he had to be more selfish in order to reach the heights of Gojo, that Jogo had to burn everything around him to a cinder, and that comparing himself to others was just stunting his own growth? That is what Mahito is. Mahito burns everything around him down. He doesn't care about human lives, he kills however he feels, and he finds his own growth and talent to be the best part about himself. This is even further confirmed in chapter 126 when Mahito says, "I find my talent to be so exhilarating. Yes, I am a true curse." Mahito is everything Sukuna was talking about. He's completely selfish. He doesn't care about the lives of those around him. He only cares about his own talent. He only cares about how fast he grows. He only cares about how he was able to learn domain expansion and even do a 0.2 second domain expansion before anybody else could. Mahito is, as he says here, a true curse. We also know that out of all of the disaster curses, Mahito was the curse for humans. Humans are more afraid of other humans than anything else, which is why Mahito was also growing as fast as he was. We also saw Hanami say to Jogo in Jogo's afterlife that Mahito was the mirror for humans, that Mahito was death for humans, and that is exactly what Mahito was while he was still alive. He went around killing humans and just made them a part of his arsenal. There is also something very subtle but very important that is almost like an Easter egg in Jujutsu Kaisen, because you will only see this in a certain translation. But before I get to that translation, I have to bring up the original statement that I will be referencing. We see that after Yuta loses to Ryu and Uro, it says, "You're reaching your limit. I've seen it. Sorcerers, cursed spirits, and strong fighters all get driven over the edge by the same thing. Overwhelming aggression that blinds them to everything else, like a calamity." So I want you to keep in mind the words "like a calamity" here. Yes, it is also talking about how in order to reach the heights of Sukuna, because well, Sukuna is shown here, you need to have an overwhelming sense of self and you need to have overwhelming aggression. Yes, Mahito is those things, but let's focus on the last couple words, like a calamity. So for this next reference, we will need to be looking at the end of chapter 20 of Jujutsu Kaisen. Now you can't look for this in Viz or Manga-C because Viz doesn't actually translate the chapter notes at the end of chapters, but for this translation we see that Mahito is actually talking to Junpei, and Junpei says to Mahito, "What kind of curse are you?" And Mahito replies, "Human. I am a curse that was born from the stomachs of people who hate and fear other people." And the chapter note here says, "The true calamity. It's human." So we see that the calamity is human and Mahito is the mirror of humans. Mahito is literally the mirror of the calamity. So we saw that later in the series, after Yuta lost his fight, they reference how the true calamity is what will become of you if you are overwhelmingly selfish and have this overwhelming sense of aggression. And then we saw how Sukuna said to Jogo that you needed to be selfish and burn everything to the ground. And these things are exactly what Mahito is. Even at the end of chapter 20, it says that the true calamity is humans. And we saw that Hanami said to Jogo that Mahito is the mirror for humans. Mahito is death. And it's not just like these statements say, oh, if you just grow like this, you'll just get strong. No, in the first statement, Sukuna says that if you think like this, you will reach the heights of Gojo. And in the second statement, Sukuna is the person who is pictured when it talks about reaching these heights. So in one comparison, we have Gojo when it comes to this mindset, and in the other comparison, we have Sukuna. Not only does Mahito have both of their mindsets, he is quite literally the mirror of the calamity that is mentioned in the second statement. And mindset changes are no small joke in Jujutsu Kaisen. We saw that with the change of mindset, Megumi was able to open up a domain expansion for the first time. We saw that with the change of mindset, Hanami, when having fun while fighting, was able to get much stronger. And we saw that with the change of mindset, Maki was able to finally become equal to Toji. There are other instances in Jujutsu Kaisen where just a simple mindset change yielded great results. And here it says that with this mindset, you can reach the heights of Gojo and Sukuna. Mahito holds this mindset. Mahito, since the beginning of the series, was able to grow in an extremely fast rate, from learning a domain expansion back in chapter 29 to being able to copy Gojo's 0.2 second domain expansion in chapter 130, and even being able to uncover his true unbridled form. Mahito showed insane amounts of progression throughout the entire series, and it's not just like this progression came from a normal sorcerer or curse who fought in conventional ways with just normal curse techniques that dealt power and defense curse techniques. Mahito truly cannot be hurt by an opponent unless the opponent has a sense of the soul, and he also can just 1-tap or 3-tap the opponent if he can just touch their soul with his hands, and any part of you that he touches with his hands will just be transfigured and can't be healed with reverse curse technique. So not only does Mahito have insane durability negation, but his durability for himself is so powerful that you can't even hurt him unless you can hurt the soul. I also want to point out that for most of the fights in the series, we actually weren't able to see Mahito fight at his full capabilities, because we know that Mahito can transform shapes. He can actually get faster when he changes his legs into hooves. He says that in his first fight against Nanami, and we even see in his fight with Mekamaru he can actually grow wings and fly. Most of the times he was fighting Yuji, and we see in Shibuya that Mahito actually says he's gonna retain his normal shape, because if he gets too big, then that's just a bigger target for Yuji to hit, and of course Yuji can damage the soul. So if he grows big wings and Yuji punches the wings, Yuji would be punching Mahito's soul. So Mahito actually had to hold back and fight in his normal form for most of his important fights in the series, but I did just have to point out that there are a bunch of capabilities with his form that Mahito has, a bunch of different transformations and animals that he can transform into in order to move faster or fly around or even go down to the size of a rat to scurry away. All of these things Mahito was able to do. We just weren't able to see him use these things to the fullest because he was fighting Yuji, who could hit the soul, and well, he died midway through the series. I truly hope that I've been able to convince you that Mahito undoubtedly had the potential to reach the heights of Gojo and Sukuna, and with the mindset that he had from those two statements that I referenced earlier, he undoubtedly would have been able to do so with not even just conventional attacks or techniques, but his absolutely broken idle transfiguration technique. And from all of the feats that I referenced, how he started off weaker, learned domain expansion, and even learned how to do a 0.2 second domain expansion, and all of the statements that I referenced, and how Nanami said that if they weren't quick in exercising Mahito, that the Jujutsu Society would be past the point of no return, and also how Mahito was able to reach his unbridled true form midway through the series. All of these things being built up for Mahito for him to ultimately die midway through the series. I just hope that I was able to convince you that if Mahito was given more time, he would have undoubtedly reached the heights of Gojo and Sukuna. With that being said, I want to thank you so much for reaching the end of the video, and if you enjoyed it, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as I do post on different topics that you guys give me and a few that I come up with on my own. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.